How's it going, everybody? Mr. T here, coming at you with another how-to video. Today we're going to do how to make a pinch pot out of clay. I'm going to show you a few tricks that work pretty well when you're working with this building style, show you a few tools that should help you out a lot, and then a couple tricks on how to expand off of what you start with to make something a little bigger rather than just that little mug that everybody imagines when you think about pinch pots. So it's going to be fun. Hope you learned something. I hope I learned something. All right, to start, I have 2 balls of clay. Really, you only need 1. It kind of just depends on what you want to make. Okay, but I'm going to start with 1 ball of clay. I would recommend that you wedge your clay before you start. If you don't know how to wedge clay, we have another video on how to wedge that you could find on my channel. But in the meantime, we're just going to start with this ball of clay. Okay, and with that ball of clay, I'm going to give it the thumbs up and then the thumbs down. Okay, I'm just going to press my thumb through the middle of it. Okay, after I press my thumb through the middle, I'm going to use my other fingers, I'm going to keep them close together and use my other fingers and pinch this wall. Okay, and as I pinch, I'm going to turn the pot around and around and around and around and around. Now, things that matter right now are how hard you are pinching, okay? And then also how tightly you're holding onto it on the bottom, okay? If you're pinching up here too hard, you're gonna make it inconsistently thick over here versus over here, okay? So if I pinch harder here than I did here, then it's gonna be all wonky. And that could create some shrinkage issues. It could create cracks in the kiln, okay? So just pay attention to how hard you're pinching it. Just be consistent with your pressure, and then don't hold on to it too hard with your left hand or with your whatever hand you're holding it in, okay? If I were to hold it too tight, you could end up just squashing what you're doing. So you wanna hold it, just support it so that you can still turn it in your hand, okay? Pinching, 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 okay? And I'm putting a lot of pressure on the inside, putting a lot of pressure right here, okay? And then on the outside, you can see all my fingerprints, kind of where I'm pressing on the outside. What that does is it leaves the bottom part between here and here, it leaves that pretty thick. And we want that to match this thickness, okay? So before it gets too wide, I'm gonna put my thumb on the inside and flip it upside down, and then press on the bottom using the same method. Now, if you have long fingers, this is good. If you have short fingers, you might want to do this step to begin with while your bowl thing that you're working on is still shallow, okay? So before it gets too long for your fingers, you want to take care of this step. Now the trick here is knowing how thick your pot is just by feeling it. Now, I realize that none of you have x-ray vision, and if you do have x-ray vision, that is neat. Hopefully you are using that power for good. But I can feel right now that this pinch pot from the bottom all the way to right about there is about this thick, and that's an ideal place to be right now, okay? The only part that's thicker is this top edge. And now that we have the bottom part up to the middle, a consistent thickness, we're gonna switch and pinch a little bit, gently pinch a little bit up here at the top edge. To make that top edge the same consistency in terms of thickness as the rest of the pot, okay? So now I have a pinch pot that's the same thickness from the edge down to the base, okay? Now, a rule in ceramics that I always tell my students is that nothing in here can be more than 1 inch thick. Otherwise, it could explode in the kiln, and that would be bad, okay? So it would be ideal to continue to pinch this, okay? And you can see sometimes I switch hands. That's totally okay. You don't have to always do it with one hand, okay? And all this pinching can kind of make this part of your hand tired, so it's good to be able to switch. Okay, but I'm going to continue to pinch this until it's roughly 1/4 of an inch thick. Okay, that is the ideal thickness for this project right now. Once again, if you go too thick with things, they can either explode in the kiln or honestly, they just kind of turn out clunky. So if you have a pound of clay, but you only make a pinch pot this big, right? That's a really clunky thing. With that much clay, you should be able to make a pretty big piece. So you want the size of your piece to be reasonable as compared to how much clay you have. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, it's like if you have a mug, okay, and you use a pound of clay to throw a mug, you want to push those walls to be as thin as possible when you're throwing on the wheel. That way you get all of the clay into place as you can, so you don't have this stumpy little 1 pound mug, okay, which just makes it hard to hold. Okay, so we're pushing this clay to be 1/4 of an inch thick, which as you can tell made it quite a bit bigger. Okay, so that is half of it. Okay, and from this point you can kind of choose what you want to do. So in a lot of cases, a lot of folks like to make just little coil bowls, or not coils, goodness gracious, pinch pot bowls. Okay, and as you can see, the inside of this is already pretty smooth just from pressing with my thumb and being consistent. So that would make a pretty good bowl right now. Okay, so what I could do is I could tap it on the table gently, and what that does is it flattens the bottom and makes it so my bowl is not going to tip over. Okay, now here are a few things that you need to pay attention to. I'm sure, hopefully, that you've seen this big old crack right here, and these little cracks over here, and these little cracks over here. Something to keep in mind is that if a crack exists before it goes into the kiln, it's just going to get worse when it's fired. Okay, so it's a good thing to smooth out cracks like that as you go. Don't wait until your clay is too hard or too dry to smooth stuff like that out. Now I'm just using my thumb, okay, to do some of this work, but with bigger cracks like this, okay, right here, you might need the help of a tool, okay, or a little pinch of clay. So I'm gonna take just a little extra clay, okay, just like that. And I'm gonna wad it up just a little bit. Okay, I'm gonna dip that in some water. I have a little cup of water right here, so I'm gonna get that wet. Okay, and I'm gonna set that into the crack. Okay, and I'm gonna smooth that out using my thumb again. Okay, now some potters right there would have scored that piece in. That's okay. And that's actually not a bad practice at all. I did not, because my clay's still soft enough that I know I can work this clay over just by smoothing it out enough to get that clay to fully blend. So I'm not gonna have to worry about cracks right there because of how much time I'm taking to smooth that piece out. I'm really blending it together, okay? Some more little cracks over here, something I could take care of with my thumb or with a finger. Okay, but if you're having a hard time smoothing out cracks, you can use a little sponge, okay? Just get that wet and gently work that over your edges, over any rough textures, and that'll help you smooth them out. Just be really careful how much water you put on that sponge. If you get your pinch pot way too wet while you're working, there's a chance that it could just crumble. Okay, there is such thing as clay being too wet, and it just starts to separate from itself. Okay, so don't get your sponge too wet when you're doing this. Okay, other things that you can make with this, you've seen some of the pinch pots on, if you type in ceramic pinch pot into Google, there's a zillion different examples. Okay, but I'm sure you've seen some of the really fancy ones. Okay, some of them are pulled way thinner than this, so feel free to pull it way thinner. Sometimes there are, the edges have kind of this cool organic rip to it, which in that case, you just want to smash it a little thinner, pinch it to be a little thinner, okay? And you kind of pull up as you're doing that, okay, to get the clay to start stretching upwards, okay? So I don't know if you can see on the video right now, but there's one side right here that's gotten just a little bit taller, okay? Another thing you can do is if you get your fingers wet when you do that, your fingers kind of slide off of the edge a little better, and it will kind of help you pinch that wall. And then you can do directional things like curl the edge over if you wanted to. You could start to shape this if you wanted to, and you can use a little paddle, like a wooden spoon would work perfect, or just use the side of your hand. And you could start to square off a side so it doesn't have to be round. You could make it more square if you wanted to. That's up to you. Okay, I'm gonna round it back out because I'm gonna show you another piece of the puzzle here. Okay, so right here at this point, I wanna show you just some tools you can use. I would recommend a needle tool, a potter's knife, okay, just a metal rib or a metal scraper. I call this a metal rib, okay, and we've already talked about your sponge. You'll want a little bowl of water nearby, okay. What I'm gonna do is actually make another pinch pot, and I'm gonna put it on top of this to make a hollow sphere. Okay, so I'm gonna set my first one aside. You can take a look at the inside and see how smooth it is. Okay, so I'm gonna do this one a little faster. Press through the middle. Pinch, 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 pinch. Okay, pinch the bottom before it gets too wide for my fingers. Okay, and then I would take the time to smooth this one out just like I did the other one. Okay, use your little sponge, smooth out little cracks, fill in big cracks. Okay, and now I'm gonna attach this to the other one I've been working on, okay? So anytime you attach a piece of clay to another, you need to score. Okay, so I'm going to use my needle tool. And scoring is a process of scratching the surface of the clay in multiple directions. Okay, don't go in all the same direction. You want to rough up that edge. So the process of scratching the surface of the clay in order to attach it to another piece. Okay, so think of it like a clay Velcro. Okay, just a zillion, which is a lot. This is why I'm not a math teacher, guys. Okay, do a whole bunch of lines. Okay, I'm gonna have you get your sponge wet and add just a little bit of water there. Now, you can use slip there, just liquid clay mixture. That's totally fine. I don't have any slip nearby, so I'm just gonna use water. Okay, I'm gonna score the other side too, because remember a Velcro has two pieces, hook and loop. In this case, they both look the same. It's just really important that it's as rough as possible. Okay. So scored that up. I'm gonna add just a little bit of water to that. And I'm gonna flip it and put it on top of my other one, okay? I'm gonna put just a little pressure down on top of it. Okay, and now the issue is that big old crack there in the middle, okay? You'll notice that the more water you add to your clay, if you add too much water or too much slip, it just makes it really hard to smooth out, okay? And that is pretty normal. Just needs to be dried a little bit, okay? So you could let this sit out for just a few minutes while it dries. Okay, or you could get a hair dryer and just add a little water, add a little heat to this. Okay, so I'm gonna press it together from my palm. See how I let that biggest part of the bowl sit in my palm, and I push it together because the air on the inside of this is supporting it structurally so that I could push it together. You really want that seam to connect. Okay, and then I'm just gonna smooth the sides over on top of each other to seal that. Okay, so you can still tell that I have a seam right there. Okay, and that is where our next tool comes in. I'm gonna take my metal scraper, okay, and what's nice is that these are really flexible, so I'm gonna bend it with my thumb, and I'm gonna start scraping, okay, and from a side, you can see I'm not holding it flat like this. I kind of curve it and let the edge scrape along my clay. And once in a while, you can see on my scraper there how I just get a little bit of clay. I use that, and I'll just press it into where I see a seam and then keep working it over. So I'm using this scraper to scrape against the clay, against that seam especially, to make it as smooth and seamless as possible. So I go against the seam, and then I'll go along with the seam, okay? To make this sphere a little better. Now, you see all these bumps and cracks and stuff. Those can be taken care of with your metal scraper as well. Okay, so we have a sphere, and from this point, again, it's kind of up to you what you want to do with that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set it down. Remember how I had a little flat base on it? Okay, so I set it down. Okay, and once this is a little more dry, okay, I want this to get a little closer to leather hard. Not too far dry, but a little closer to leather hard. And then once it is, we're gonna pretend like it's leather hard now. Okay, I'm gonna use my potter's knife, okay, and I'm gonna cut a circle out of the top of it. Okay, so there's my opening. I'm gonna pinch that just like I do anything else, and as I'm pinching, I'm kind of pushing out with my thumb to kind of widen this neck just a little bit. Okay, to open that up. And if you see, it's kind of starting to give me this little bulb looking base thing. Okay, and from there, I can continue pulling that out if I wanted to. I could pinch a little spout into it. And then, using just a little bit of extra clay, roll out a coil. Okay, I would make a better one than that. I'm gonna smooth it out. That's a really rough looking coil, Mr. T. Okay, I'm gonna cut off the end of it. And then I can attach it back here, line it up with the spout, and I would score that into place. Add just a little bit of water. Press that on. A little pressure from the inside to support, and then down here at the bottom, we would do the same thing. Okay? Then from there, it's just craftsmanship, paying attention to details, so make sure your top edge is nice and smooth. There's not any roughness to it. Okay, so I'm using that sponge again, not too wet, otherwise it could make way more trouble for you. Okay, and I'm just gonna round it out and make it nice and smooth, nice and soft. Oops. Okay, and then I would take my time on the outside to make sure the rest of it is nice and smooth as well. Okay, the inside, if you look at it, I'm not sure if you can see it. Let's see if I can hold it a little closer. Okay, you can see down there, I'm going to point at it, down here on the inside, you can see the seam where I connected it, when I connected those two balls. Okay, so I would, if I were you, put your hand in there and smooth that out. If the seam's not going away, you can add just a little bit of clay. Okay, and if you can't reach it, now would be a good time to bring in your potter's knife. And of course, I don't have one near me. Okay, the potter's knife looks like this. Not a potter's knife, the wooden knife. This is a potter's knife. Use your wooden knife, okay? And you're gonna smooth out that crack on the inside with this part as it's curved just a little bit. So on the inside, you can use that as an extension of your hand or your fingers to really get that part nice and smooth. Okay, you could also put the sponge in there. Okay, you just have to be careful not to put too much water. Okay, put your sponge in there and kind of twist it around to really smooth out lines and stuff. And then make any adjustments to it. And you made yourself a tiny little pot. Up to this point, hopefully everything makes sense. If you have any questions, feel free to leave those in the comments and I will do my best to answer. And then don't forget, the beauty of being in 3D art class is that we can add texture to pretty much anything we want to. So use your tools to create cool patterns, cool designs. Okay, just for the sake of decoration and to make it look better. Okay? And that is all I got.